Darren Borrino. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You
Founder
got it.
and ECD of INKFISH New York City, NYC, formerly of Runt. You're originally hailing from South Africa, but you've been all over. You've done some stint in the UK. You've done a bit in Australia, I think.
Hmm.
You moved out to the US, coming up to about 9 years, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right.
That's when you started Runt, and now you've taken on this new version of being an entrepreneur in the advertising scene to go up against the big pot of advertising in New York City under Inkfish.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the background of who you are. You've obviously been well awarded. People who are going to be googling Darren Borino can find out all the cool stuff that you've you've garnered at this point. But this is the conversation about the man behind the medals and the learning and the experience of what you've seen, what you are seeing, and what you foresee happening as we move forward. So I've already talked about we do want to talk about the holding companies, but first and foremost, and this is I guess something I was thinking about after the time we did a prelim call. Uh, there might be a conversation of holding companies and how they operate in the U.S. and versus how an Inkfish works side by side by them, head on with them. But I'm actually more interested because you've had so much time working. We all have. If fortunately or unfortunately, if you've been doing this for a decade plus, we've all had stints in holding companies. It's not a bad thing. It's a great education for where we learn a lot of the fundamentals of advertising. I think it's one of the things you mentioned right at the start about how young people sometimes need to look where their motivation to do this is. And one of the things we had, let's be honest, for wherever we are now in the scope of advertising, holding companies are what gave us the break, the attention, the means to do a lot of stuff we are doing. So before we talk about holding companies in New York versus an Inkfish, I'd like you to talk about what do you think holding companies were like when you and I would have started a while back, and how you think things have changed with holding companies in general, not just the US?
I mean, it's such an interesting question, right? Because exactly like you said, like I would have no skills, I would not have the taste I have, I would not have the grit that I have if it wasn't for holding companies. And I started in South Africa in Johannesburg, TBWA, Hunt Lascaris, small agency, but like a lot of power. It was ranked number ninth in the world at one point, and from a tiny little place in South Africa, it was pretty impressive. And I didn't realize how spoiled I was at that agency. In that agency, creative ran the show, right? If the client didn't buy a concept, then we went back and came with another concept. We didn't say, oh, what do you want us to do? What do you want us to change? We end up with this watered down version of it. They were basically saying, this is what we know will solve your business problem. I don't need to hear your point of view on it. This is what we know will work. And
This
if they
is this is
didn't
about
buy
20
that,
years ago. 20 years ago, we're talking about.
about 20 years ago, yeah, 22, 23 years ago. I was obviously a baby at the time and didn't really understand how good it was. But there was a rule in the agency that if you don't have a brief, and if that brief does not have the strategy clearly labeled on there, and it hasn't been signed off by client, and the media has not been agreed, and the budget is very clear, and the whole brief had to fit on one page. If that wasn't all done, you kick it back to the traffic department, right? And the traffic department, as Americans maybe don't know, is the department that sits in the middle of the agency, and they understand every creative person's schedule, right? They know exactly this person. So you'd come in the morning, your name would be on a board, and they would say, Darren, you're going to be doing this edit from this time to this time. Then you're going to be conceptualizing a new stuff for a bank at this time and this time. Then you're going to be doing some proactive work after that, whatever it is. But my day was managed, right? Which meant they were getting the best of me. It also meant that I was never overloaded. Often I'd be working on 2 or 3 projects at once, but I find here in the US, sometimes you're juggling 6 or 7 and the deadlines are a lot more truncated. So a few things happened at TBWA Hunt Lascaris. Was the strategy was signed off, the briefs were clear, creative was the most important piece, right? Because if the creative work stops or the creative work goes down, that's what the consumer sees at the end of the line. It doesn't really matter if the client was super happy, or if the meetings happened on time, or if the money came in. If that creative work wasn't good, then the agency didn't do well, and the clients didn't perform, and they didn't attract the right type of talent. So having creative at the center really made such a difference.
Yeah, because creative is like it's a tangible outcome output of all the effort that goes in, right? Which is why
Absolutely.
it felt like the main thing that was holding everything up in some ways. Uh, as we go on, let's talk a bit more about the importance of it. And I think we will naturally anyway. But but so, and I love the way you were saying about a couple of decades ago. There was a lot more structure, and maybe that was based on some of the comforts that we all had at holding companies. I mean, we had there was a lot more trust. Agencies and clients, we had a different level. I'm not saying we don't have trust anymore, but I think the accountability of things have become so fine details now. We sometimes have done away with a lot of these luxuries. Are you suggesting there's no traffic in the US? I got the feeling you were saying that.
That's definitely what I'm saying. Yeah. So the way it works in the US, and so I was working with Rob Rutherford, my incredible partner at the time. Very smart guy, likes a lot of process, very strategic. And we arrived at Chiat Day in New York, and for the first sort of 2 months, we were the only ones in the agency working till 3 a.m. And we were like, "What is going on?" And I stopped him at one time and I said, "Rob, look up. No one else is here again. Like we're missing a trick." And basically, what was happening was we didn't know that we could say no to jobs. So you have all the creative teams on one floor, then you have project managers, and it's their job to find any creative team to do the work for you. So you might get hit up with one project manager. They're like, "Hey, we need you in this meeting," and you're like, "Okay, great. I assume someone's aware of all the work we're on, so that seems fair." And then another one will say, "We need you to fly to Fort Lauderdale for this meeting," and another one will say, "We need you to be in this pitch." And they don't really have any understanding of what each person's working on. It's their job just to hunt people down. So we didn't know you could actually say no to things. So we were just saying yes to everything and overloading ourselves in an insane way. And I think what that does, it does a few things that are really not great. Like the project managers have no idea which creative team is going to serve the brief best. Some teams are better at TV, some teams are better at conceptual activations, whatever they need to do. And then it ends up burning the creative teams out too. So this, it's a bit of a bigger problem that I find in not only the US but in bigger markets is not many people are having a holistic view over the whole system, right? They go, it's my job to find a team to solve this one problem, and it's kind of you're getting stuck in the weeds with that one problem, and no one's looking at the overarching thing, going, wait, are the best teams working on the best briefs for that team? And is there an understanding of how much effort we're putting in and what we're getting out? So it kind of becomes quite chaotic. And what I find in for the creative process, it's really difficult to come up with something truly creative that is strategic, that's on the right brand tone of voice, that delivers across the media spectrum that you need it to do, if the rest of that structure has not been agreed on, the strategy hasn't been agreed on, the media plan hasn't been done, the tone of voice has not been set, and you have someone with good taste picking the right ideas, then it's just generally chaos. And occasionally a good idea might sneak through, but you need that structure. You need to do all the grown up stuff first before you get to the fun creative work. And I think people have lost sight of that because there's a lot of urgency, a lot of hey, we're going to brief you today. We need to have 10 ideas by tomorrow morning, and we all know that, yes, you'll have 10 ideas for sure, no problem. Do we know that they are going to be the best ideas? Have we slept on it a little bit? Have we really pressure tested it? Have we researched what the competitors are doing? Probably not. And it's this culture of this as fast as you can, as fast as you can. And I find you end up delivering work that is sort of 50% of where it should be. Then you go to a meeting with clients and they say this is wrong. And then you go back again and you hit that same speed timeline, and no one's stopping to actually think things through. And I think it's just getting worse and worse, as the holding companies struggle to hold on to revenue. So they keep promising more and more things to the clients. We'll get back to you quicker, cheaper, faster. And you can definitely feel it in the general market. The level of the work is just going down and down. It's a race to the bottom because the next agency will promise, oh, we'll do it cheaper, better, faster than these guys, and then they'll have to undercut them. So it's truly a race to the bottom. And I think that's not such a good thing for the creative work, and I think it's a big problem that holding companies maybe need to be aware of.
So I take it that is really your answer to what it was like before and what it is now. What you're saying is, I mean, the cheaper, faster,
Mm,
cheaper, faster,
better.
uh, better.
Mhm.
The Holy Trinity is getting squeezed down, and that's really the big. Do you notice anything else? I mean, so you're talking about from a work welfare operational kind of stuff. Are you seeing holding companies are doing anything differently, or that pretty much is what that's all the causation, right? It's cause and effect. Those are the cause and effects of the difference between now and before.
Yeah.
So then to drill down further, and I guess you kind of already have, but um, do you think to to keep it all nice and balanced here, do you think holding companies in the US are doing better or worse than holding companies in other countries? And maybe it's not necessarily companies that you work with, but you've got enough peers and colleagues all around the world, and I'm sure you exchange
Mhm.
notes. Are you seeing something? Well, hang on a second. We're doing this. You're not doing that. Beside the fact that we have PMs and you have traffic, are you seeing
Yeah.
some things in the now of holding companies that are pros and cons, and it doesn't have to be con on your side or pro on your side? It can be, what do you think they might be doing better? What do you think you guys might be doing better in the US?
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to two things, right? And the US struggles with both. One is the size of the company. In the US, the agencies here are huge. Like Ogilvy gets over to 2,000 people in the past. It's like a city, right?
Yeah.
So of course that brings its own problems and issues, and people not really delivering creative work, but still being able to exist in this political environment. They know how to manage up well. They make alliances, but they never really do like a lot of the work. And then the second one I would say is cultural. And in the US, it's very much a service industry, right? You go to a restaurant with an American person, they won't say, I'll have the pizza. They'll say, I'll have the pizza, and can you explain this type of vegetable that's on it, and where does this come from, and can I get this addition? Used to having all of their needs catered all of the time, right? Even when you're selling work in America, it's a lot of spoon feeding, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that you have to explain everything in such detail. Any shoot, you can't just say, "Hey, this is the idea. These are the characters. Here's the story. Let's go shoot it." You need to know exactly what shoes are they wearing, what socks are they wearing, what's their tone, what's their backstory. You need to understand it in such incredible detail, and that really does slow everything down. But what it also does is it trains clients to be very involved in the creative process. And sometimes you're spending a lot of time doing busy work where you're explaining things that really should be intuitive. And it goes back to that point of trust, right? Back in the day, if Nike were going to get a great commercial done by Wyden and Kennedy, they would say, here's the concept, here's this. We trust you. You guys have done this so many times. We know you're going to nail it. Here are five things we're concerned about. And I'm not saying detach client from it. I'm saying let client be in charge of client things and let agency be in charge of agency things. But I think those two worlds have definitely bled into each other. And also because clients will say, well, we want to be more involved. And if you're not going to do it, the other agency will have us more involved. So it kind of becomes this trade-off where the creativity takes a back seat, and it kind of becomes a service game. And I think as a holding company, as I mentioned before, are struggling with revenue and struggling to hold on to talent, it all sort of compounds into this weird environment where clients are really involved in the creative a little more than maybe they should be, and there is less trust with the agencies because the agencies are also battling their own problems.
Okay, let's put the holding companies aside for a sec. You haven't had to worry about the ongoing stuff happening in holding companies for the last 7 years. Like I said, between Runt and Inkfish now. So then let's talk about holding companies in relation to now they are it's the same people that you're meeting maybe at the boardroom, at the pitch meeting, yours before theirs, vice versa. I have some assumptions about New York holding companies based on some conversations I've had with some mutual peers and understanding a little bit of what's happening out there. When we look at smaller markets like in APEC and Asia Pacific, which are big regional hub markets, you've got boutique agencies, you've got the smaller agencies, the challenger brands. they are giving the holding companies a run for the money, certainly in smaller markets like, let's say, Singapore, where I've spent a long time. But I get the feeling there's enough to go around in New York, in the sense that it's not that your fight is any easier, but there's less in your way in terms of let's drive them off the road type of thing.
Hmm.
Like, is that
Hmm.
true? Like, do you think there's enough of the pie to go around?
Again, it'll come back to a cultural thing. So yes, there in New York, the money here is it's vulgar at a point. You know, to have sort of $3 million for a TV commercial is pretty normal. $1 million, creatives roll their eyes. You know, you take 1 million US dollars and you go and shoot something in New Zealand, their minds will explode. Um, so there's definitely enough to go around. But the cultural part is, you know, in the United States, you can lose your job. You'll be out of the building within 20 minutes. HR will have a quick chat. You'll sign something. You'll pack your stuff in a box and you're gone. There's no, in all the other places, you know, South Africa, Prague, working in and out of London and Australia, you know, it is all those places. It is, you'll have to make quite a lot of mistakes. Then you have three verbal warnings. Then you have three written warnings. Then they send you for training for that issue, and then it's time to leave. So you've got quite a lot of flex, right? You can take a lot of chances. You can present a crazy idea to the client, and they can like almost walk out of the boardroom offended or upset, and you're like, okay, let's not do that again. But in the United States, if you make one of those plays, you could be out the door that afternoon. So it really is creates this sense of fear, right? And in an environment of fear, people don't take any risks. They don't want to try something new. They just want to make it to retirement. They want their kids to stay in college. They want to keep their medical coverage. So it becomes this environment where clients are not always that open to trying something new. So they'd much rather be paying a holding company literally 10 or 20 times more than they'd be paying me as Inkfish to keep doing the same thing that is quite average and quite normal. And I'm not saying it always is, but a lot of the time it is because the whole group, the whole client team agreed on that. And so everyone's safe, everyone's fine. Like it's staying in, we're on the road, we're in the middle of the road, but there's no one's driving off the road, right? And then I come to them and I say, hey, I can give you, I'm exactly the same creative you'd be paying in the big agencies. I can get it to you faster, I can get it to you better, and I can guarantee you the work will be more interesting and unexpected, right? Because I pull in
And is it
teams from
still
around the world.
is it
Hmm.
still 20 to 1? Are you still saying and you can still give me the one instead of the 20?
Absolutely. I have
Right.
got almost no overheads at all. You know, I don't have kids, I don't have pets, I don't have pot plants, I don't need to go to Cannes every year, I don't have a 8-story building, I don't have all of these things, right? So I can literally give them exactly the same product, quicker, better, faster, more interesting, whatever they want. And I can flex and change. I can pull in strategists from London if you want. I can pull in graphic designers from Australia. I can pull in conceptual campaign builders from South Africa, whatever you need. I can assemble a world star team for you and still get it to you so much more affordable. So on paper, of course, you'd say, of course, they're going to try that out. But that means taking a risk. That means them saying, you know what, let's try something different here. And if that goes wrong, even for a second, then everybody gets fired. The kids don't go to college. You don't get medical coverage. In the United States, it's a real threat. So one of the oversights I had with launching Inkfish was I was like, oh, my product's better, cheaper, faster. Of course, people are going to go for it. And they'll have the meetings with you and I'll point out all the numbers and I'll even go as far as to even say, let me come back to you tomorrow with a full campaign of what I would do.
Mhm.
And they're like, great, let's do that. And then the emails peter out slowly and the calls don't get returned. So I found that has been the biggest barrier is getting people to feel confident enough to come with me to try something new and different, as opposed to staying with what they've already got. But staying with what you, nobody ever gets fired for keeping doing the same thing that everyone agreed on. So that's something I've struggled with a little bit.
I'm trying to understand if you've convinced me that it's better to take a punt and do what you're doing versus being in a holding company. And I'm being a devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Does that make you quite a big outlier in that sense to say, you know what, I'm just not happy with status quo and I want to do it a different way,
Mm-hmm.
even though it comes with a bit of baggage, knowing fully well, as you've noticed, that it's not really so much of a threat. It's the fact that even clients are not going to be brave enough to, like, you really
Mm-hmm.
have to be convincing them in orthodox ways, to get them to budge.
I think it comes down to status. So, when I decided to start Inkfish, my highest role ever was ECD. Um, and had I been CCO, I think it would have been much more successful, right? There's a great agency in Atlanta called Murder Hornet, run by Noel Cottrell. Noel Cottrell was CCO of Fitzco, CCO of Giant Spoon for a hot minute, CCO of VML Kansas, and he was working directly with the heads of Coca-Cola and the heads of Wendy's and stuff. So he made those connections, and they had trusted him in that agency to do the type of work, right? Meanwhile, me being a couple of rungs below that, I feel almost like a new guy coming in there because I'm not involved in those very high level meetings. I don't have those relationships of 10 years with Coca-Cola and those sort of things. And but that's what I found is that those relationships are actually the most invaluable thing, right? I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I've only been in the States for 9 years. I've got a strange accent. Is my work going to be good enough to be accepted in the American market? Do I get American humor? And the truth is, I don't need to. I hire people that do that. I hire American writers all the time to write comedy. We do all our research in the United States and we hire strategists that understand the market here. But for someone to have to work all that out and take a chance with me, it might feel just a little bit off to them. So they'd much rather stick with who they have. So I would say if you are high enough and you have enough connections in the United States and clients that trust you already, then you should absolutely start your own thing. If not, there are days where I feel like I'm selling encyclopedias door to door. I'm going, hi, I'd love to have a chat with you. I mean, it's quite a shock to the ego, going from winning high awards and always being the cool guy in the agency, having the great ideas, to all of a sudden speaking to like a junior product manager saying like, I'd love to have 2 minutes to chat and getting no way with them at all. So it's pretty good ego check for me in doing that. That said, I managed to pick up a few clients. I managed to do some work. And the beauty of me having this now, and I kind of focus a lot on startups. Now, the beauty with startups is they haven't dealt with agencies before, so they don't know what it's like
Unspoiled.
or what it needs to be like exactly. So I can almost, and I say train in a non-condescending way. I can show them the best process, right? Often I'll present creative platforms or brand repositioning ideas, and I will say, okay, take a look at this. And they're like, great, we'll get back to you tomorrow morning. I'm like, don't. Take a week. Show it to your wife. Think about it. Tell me what you love. Look at what the competitors have done. Because this navigation choice we're making right now is the most important decision you're making for your company. And I want you to think it through. And if you don't like it, tell me it's bad. No problem. We'll come up with something else because we'll work on this together until we're happy with it. So we take all the panic out of it, all the stress out of it. It also gives me time to think it through properly. And as we know, once the creative idea is in the creative mind, I don't switch it off at 5 o'clock. I'll be thinking of art direction at 4 a.m. I'll be writing little lines on things as I find it. Just gives us more time to marinate it and really think about it properly, and then give them something that is of value. And I still, because I can control the timelines, we still get it ahead of what we would normally do in the bigger holding companies because we're not having six panicked rounds of work. We're having three solid meetings where we're building on what we've got because we're all along for the same journey and we're building on it as opposed to panicking and starting again and starting again. So, and that makes me feel very fulfilled. It makes client feel like they're part of the process and the work is much better at the end.
You call me crazy, Darren, but you've just described what good old fashioned ad agency used to be.
That's right.
That's exactly what they were. That I mean, you're saying it, and at some point, I'm like, wait a minute, why does this sound familiar? This is what built the. You know, that's what these were the shoulders that was it was all built on, right? This is the good old fashioned way of saying we are on your side, we get it. Don't worry, we're going to be taking you through it step by step, and you don't
Yeah,
have to fret too much. Okay,
absolutely.
that's okay. That makes sense, absolutely, because you're right. There is a void. There's this white space where if that's a foreign concept in many ways, and I'm sure it's not an it can be an isolated incident. Of course, people are trying to do the same thing, but that seems to be the way to differentiate yourself from the holding companies who are set in their ways. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yep.
It's things are going to keep churning in anyway. So why do we have to why do we have to change strategies? You mentioned something interesting, which brings up another point, and you mentioned titles. You mentioned about clout, about well, if I was like this guy who had these three letters instead of these three letters, I would have certain type of access, and open door policy would be a lot easier. Now,
Mhm.
I would say um, Titles usually come either before or after a piece of medals, right? Awards. There's I've got a love hate relationship with the importance of awards when it comes to being able to do good work. You've been successful, and this it's part of our system. We Good work should be rewarded, and we have measure for these things.
Hmm.
Coming back again, CCO, ECD, all of ECDs, CCOs willing to bet have great medals. In the US market, I have been told um, awards, your one shows, your Cannes, your D&ADs, all the rest of it, their Clios. These are great to have, but they're not the end all of getting a job. What do you say about that?
I think that getting a job in the US is largely who you know. In the smaller markets, I would do a great piece of work and the phone would ring. I'd get a job offer from another agency, win a golden can, everyone knows about it. But here in the US, you get lost in the source. It's just, I think it's 5 or 6 times bigger than South Africa. It's huge. Like the amount of people here is insane. So a lot of people think you can just come here and do great work and people will notice. You can be an incredibly good creative here. I mean, like world class, strategic, smart creative, and you can be having killer meetings, nailing it for 2 years and still make nothing because the way it's structured here with the companies is they make their money on marking up the hours. How many people are in the agency? How many hours did they work? And also, how many people can you fit into a boardroom? Because every extra person they get to charge those hours, right? And as we know, the creative idea, this delicate, nuanced little baby of a concept that you need to protect, the chances of you keeping that concept intact when there are 20 people in the room, and let's say 10 of them don't need to be there and they know they don't need to be there. So the first thing they do is they put their hand up and they'll make a comment or try and add something or point something wrong with the problem, which is fine, but almost everyone's opinion is taken as equal. So I've had it before where great concepts and you have CCOs and ECDs in the room, and I'm debating an intern about why this idea is right versus another idea. And that's fine. That's good for their learning and all that sort of stuff. But it's really difficult to protect a delicate, nuanced idea over a year or 2 years it takes to make it, where so many things can happen, right? Not just happen to the idea. The strategy can change, the budget can change, the CMO can leave, which often happens every 2.5 years. And that means you reset the whole process again. In the smaller markets, you are speaking to a decision maker in meeting two or three. If you get to meeting 5 or 6, I would call the strategist in and say, I think we need to rework the strategy because there's a fundamental problem here that's maybe not creative. Because usually by meeting 4 or 5, they bought something and then you're executing it within a month and a half. So the budgets are much smaller, but you do get to make a lot more work, which as a creative is far more fulfilling than flying around America having great meetings, but no one's buying anything.
Okay, so then clear something for me. You are the founder of a company, Inkfish. I come to you as a New Yorker. I'm a local. I'm a local New Yorker, and I
Mhm.
come to you and I say, "Hi, Darren. I am David. I've got a Grand Clio, and I've done the Gatorade spot." Or do I say, "Hi, I'm David. I did the Gatorade spot, and I have a Grand Clio." Does that make any difference?
Definitely the work you've made first and less about the awards, right? So the Clios and stuff are great and awards are great. As we know, every award show has now increased their amount of categories. When I first started winning awards, when I won my Gold Lion, when I was in, this is like 2003, 2004, I was literally on like a TV show. I was interviewed on the radio stations. It was a big deal. And now the can categories specifically have just exploded. So almost everybody has won an award. They've got a website that looks great. They've got some work under their belt, because again, because you have 20 people in the room and not 10, and a great idea happens, that's 20 names on the awards. And you can go take a look at any award show, any awarded piece of work that's come from the US, and the credits list is way longer than any other country, right? I'm used to having like 2 or 3 people and then maybe some producers and people that helped out. But the creative team is usually quite lean, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore. But in the US, you'll have 40 names on there. So really, did 40 people really come up with that idea, and did they really all contribute it in the same way? So it's become impossible to know, to sort of separate the charlatans out from the real talented people. And like I said, everyone's website looks good, everyone's won some awards. So it's almost impossible to know that just from the awards. But if someone comes and says to me, I did the latest Gatorade campaign, and I can ask questions, I'm like, great, what was the idea before client changed it? How many days did you shoot for? Did you have a backup plan? What happened that almost stopped it? So I can ask these questions, and if people have the answers to that, if they say, "Oh, they actually started out way more an aggressive conceptual idea, and they watered it down to this," or they understand some details in it, then I'm like, "Okay, I feel like you were really involved in that." It gives me more to sort of test them on, and to sort of understand, are you really part of it, or have you just sort of jumped on the back of this one?
All right. Now I'm David and I'm Gen Z. I'm a young guy. I want to get started. And I really like the stuff that you're doing. And I'd rather be with an Inkfish rather than be with an Ogilvy. No disrespect to any companies that I'm naming here, but,
Hmm.
rather than being with an Ogilvy. But,
Yep.
wh- and so this Gen Zer tells you just that. But then they go, the only access I have to what a good ad is, maybe it's what I'm seeing on TV. But then you guys also have these annual awards. You got your Khan, and everyone keeps talking about it. I'm the junior in the department, and I see everyone's jumping up and down, bottles popping. What would you tell me for a person who, first of all, hasn't got to the point where perhaps I've been able to get to that point? Should I worry so much about it? Should I worry so much? Should I be thinking more about my crafting and coming up with ideas, or would you say one will lead to the other anyway, so I shouldn't worry about it?
Something that served me very well. And I've been in many agencies where you get caught up in the politics and what's going on, and I always zoom myself out and I go, if you focus on the work, everything else follows. If the work is great, the client will begin to trust you. If the work is great, the money will come. If the work is great, the awards will come. You'll feel good about it. If the work is great, the creative teams will respond to you well. So I say focus on the work. Spend as much time as you can writing ideas, beating yourself up about it, going back at it again, and just keep that process going all the time. It's um, and worry less about the optics of it. In New York, I remember when I first walked into Shy at Day, I watched these creative directors in meetings. Each one of them have got a very bespoke look, whether it's like a collared shirt and a bow tie and black glasses, or they have like a punk rock look, but like curated looks.
I saw them,
Yeah, it
just
is
as you said
like
it.
sometimes I feel like I'm walking around like GTA 5. Like everyone has got a separate character, and you ask any American what they're about, they're like, "Well, I'm into this, and I stand for this, and I went to this protest, and this is my music." It's almost like a curated shop front that they've got. And then nobody presents better than Americans. They are really good, and I don't mean in a big theatrical way. They have been from a young age. They've been doing debates and theater shows and talent shows, and they're very comfortable presenting themselves. So the level of presentations I find in the US are really quite high. So you can imagine me coming from South Africa, like a little country bumpkin, sitting in these meetings, and I watch these curated guys that look incredible. They're well dressed. They've got all the buzzwords. They've studied the client's business like in depth. They understand how it is. They're almost like account manager, strategists, creative hybrids. And I was really quite intimidated. I'm like, I remember telling myself, I just need to stick it out 6 months here so I don't look like an idiot if I leave.
And you were CD at the time.
I was a GCD
Okay.
at the time.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Wow.
Um, but then what I did was I went home and I was like, okay, well, I better see what sort of work is going on behind these creative leaders. And 99% of it was terrible. They'd made two TV ads that were bad, the very first base concepts. And I was like, this is different. It's like stepping through the looking glass. This is a completely different way. It's more about how you come across and what you look like. And I think it's a sort of factor of this late stage capitalism where everything is slightly bloated. So it's much more important that you look good and you're visible in the agency and you're keeping the client happy than actually building your portfolio. Now, I'm used to the places I've worked at. I'm used to um, seeing the work of the people that I admire the most and going to meet them, and it's some like slightly overweight dude in a black t-shirt who's sitting in the corner writing on a notepad, and that's the guy you got to watch out for. But here in the US, a lot of it is about service and about coming across confident and lots of show and lots of borrowed interest and a big track, and we'll throw a celebrity in. There's a lot of that going on, a lot of the smoke and mirrors, but not a lot of ideas.
Look, I think if I ask you right now, what's an agency outside the US that you think are really kicking ass? I'm sure you have an answer for that. But I, rather than singling one person out, my question to you would be outside the US, not comparing to the US. What market do you think is singular market do you think is punching above its weight? I mean, I guess outside the US, every market will be punching above its weight because of the size of the market and the revenue coming in. But who do you think are really gunning it? Who are doing really well right now? Which singular market is doing very well right now overall?
I mean, I think it's happening everywhere. We're seeing a lot of these satellite agencies, independent indies, whatever you want to call them, and I get very excited about that. You know, not at the detriment of holding companies, but more about getting back to the purity of creative work. Right, smaller teams can move quicker. You speak to the decision maker much quicker. Um, and all of those things are very helpful for creative work. So in Australia, there's an agency called Bear Meets Eagle on Fire. Great name, great agency. Micah Walker, he's done some incredible work. They have just won a series of Grand Prix and golds at Cannes. He's done incredible work all the time. But then you look at their work, and it really does remind me of how it used to be 20 years ago. They're not these overly shouty, overly expressive type ads. They're like small, simple, fun, creative concepts, you know. They did some stuff for Telstra, which used these little puppets, and they basically took all the different regions of Australia, and they broke each section down, and they found a cute little insight for each one of those areas, and then wrote like a funny little skit, and basically just saying that it is better in this area because of this product. It's a telecom company. Really simple sort of thing. And I think that these days, because of the pressure from companies, we become so stressed that we feel the pressure that we need to include so much into it. Like it's not an ad if it doesn't have a famous song on it or it doesn't have a celebrity in it and all that sort. And I think this is all a result of these agencies feeling the pressure and needing to perform as opposed to really think. So if there was one market, I mean, South America is always killing it. They always do very well. But I wonder what their real day-to-day work looks like. I think they're really good at winning awards, and I think that's good. I think we all need to do that.
Brazil,
It's
yeah.
exactly Brazil. You know, it's kind of like the fashion industry. Like a lot of the stuff you see from Balenciaga, you're not really going to wear to the gym. You're not really going to wear it out for dinner because you look like crazy. But it's good that we have those edges. It gives you a chance to show off and really show how far can we push this? How much can I, how clever can I be with these ideas? If you take a look at a market like Australia, and I pick Australia because they've got a strong currency, which means the budgets are still reasonable. They are nothing in comparison to the United States. You know, if you get a two or $300,000 budget there, it is a big budget, and you can do something with that, which forces you to think much more creatively. Here in the US, they'll drop $5, $6 million on a TV commercial, and then you bring them a simple concept, and they're like, "We have all this money left over. Why don't we get Kevin Hart in it?" We're like, "Well, it doesn't need Kevin Hart in the ad." It's like, "But we can get him, and why don't we throw this track in, and why don't we throw this?" So sometimes having less money and tighter boundaries for the brief forces you to think much deeper, and then I think that work is way more effective. So I find what I like about the Australian market is they have a great sense of humor. They don't take themselves too seriously. They've got a great work-life balance, which means the creatives are not trapped in the agencies all the time. They're also out surfing and seeing concerts and traveling, and they bring all that goodness back into the work all the time. I find here in the US, people literally live in the agency. You're working long days every day, and I'm not saying that the output is much better. I'm saying the effort going in versus the output that you get out is maybe a little unbalanced.
You know, I remember. So I started, I guess, 25 years ago myself, and one of the things I remember when I started was you looked at the top of your brief and it had the budget on it, 150,000, whatever it was. But it was nice to know what that did, what it meant. Not to know what it meant. What is
Yeah.
150? Who cares? Here's the That's a number up there, but here's the brief. Here's the fun. Let's solve this.
Yeah,
And then slowly we learn, oh yeah, but that's $180,000 idea, and that's okay. But that was an interesting, there's something to be said about not having to worry so much about what the budget is. But in a way, it's cart before the horse in the U.S. in many sense, right? Because you start with a big shiny number, and you start going, what? How much can I polish with the shiny number, right?
absolutely.
So okay, so that's an observation that I felt, because the older I've gotten, the more experience I've gotten, I start, you can't help but start censoring yourself. In a way, it's almost a job of being the leader in some respects, where someone goes, "Oh, let's do this, boss." It's like, yeah, I don't think we can quite do that, but I like where you're going with it. There is something beautiful about not having to worry about it. It keeps you concentrating on the good work. And in New Zealand, certainly pre 2010, when I was still there, even though we knew there was that type of environment where your ECD would be like, you know what, this is worth a shot anyway. Let's try to get some more money out of it. And you'd rather be going this way up, like from here up to there, rather than going, how do I fill up this cash reserve,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right?
And the one thing I will add is with big budgets come big crowds of people, comes pressure. A lot of people are,
You mean
I
over
was
your shoulder kind of a thing?
over your shoulder. Yeah, if we're going to make a $300,000 like video online piece of content, like I can guarantee you'll present it to two or three people and it'll be sold, no problem. But when you've got a $5 million TV commercial, like the CEO needs to see it, the MD needs to see it, a lot of people get involved. And those people are often trained in being very analytical and going very detailed, which then means that your creative idea, which could almost become even more beautiful when you shoot it or something with happy little accidents and you adjust it as you go, it takes all of that out of the way because those people that are running the companies, and I completely understand that if I was in charge of $5 million, I want to know exactly what's happening with it. But what it does do is it takes that flexibility out of it and the fun out of the idea sometimes. And so you end up, when you're executing, you're almost painting by numbers. Everyone's agreed exactly what's going to happen. And there's not too much chance for those random little things to happen. Like I'm sure you remember the Tiger Woods commercial where it was just that little viral video of him bouncing the ball and he hits it. That's something the director just turned the camera and shot
I heard.
on the
Yeah, I
side,
remember.
right?
Yeah.
And you might get away with that, but there's not that much of that creative sort of flex. A good friend of mine, Damon Stapleton, yeah, a thing he says is like, it's the cracks that let the light in. I think it's a Leonard Cohen lyric, and that's what it is. You can't have this completely perfect paint by numbers thing because that's what you get at the end of the day. It's something I've explained to clients before. I was on a shoot recently, and it was extremely buttoned up. It was very, very buttoned up all the way through. But it kind of felt like the clients were running the shoot and the account managers were running the shoot, and it was extremely tight. And I was trying to explain it to them. I said, you could find the world's best Italian sartorialist to make you a suit. And the second he walks in the door, you say, okay, it needs to be this length, it needs to be this way long. I want you to cut it this way. And you'll definitely get a suit, and it'll definitely be made by him, but it's not the suit that he would have made. And sometimes by trusting your agency and letting them just have a little bit of a looser approach, you end up with a much more real and sort of more tangible, tactile piece of work than something that is too formulaic and too clinical.
You mentioned when I asked you, you mentioned Australia, and I agree. There's a lot of good stuff. I mean, obviously, I believe the stuff that's happening in the Antipodes, New Zealand, Australia. They're always doing really great work.
Mm-hmm.
I have a. This is a left field question. I don't know if it's a rugby nation thing. Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, England. Certainly, I guess the four English speaking nations. Commiseration for the weekend, by the way.
Tough, tough weekend.
Um, 20, 25, 30 years ago, Australia and New Zealand had this huge influx. If you remember, 30 years ago was the height of British advertising, like where we kind of saw, man, this is what it means to do
Harvey
good.
Nichols, Economist, all of it. Killer
The
stuff.
Guinness,
Conceptually
Boddingtons,
smart. Yeah.
absolutely. 30 years ago. there was a migration. There was a huge migration of great leaders or soon to be leaders who made their way down to places like Australia and New Zealand. I don't know how much of
Mhm.
it happened towards South Africa. Well, of course, Huntler Scars, of course, things are happening there. But I think there's a
Yep.
lot more South Africans going up to London as opposed to Aussies and Kiwis going up to London. That was happening, but we were seeing a lot of that really heavy hitting talent coming down. Do you think that's probably the reason why they've kind of embedded in a different way? And I'm surprised since we didn't bring up the UK. Do you think a lot of the shine has gone off on that side?
I mean, I think globally the work has just become less conceptual. I remember, and maybe it's also I've grown as a creative, but I remember seeing, the D&AD awards, and every single one of them just blew my mind. And the same thing with Cannes, And while the D&AD awards have really kept their standard, I mean, to me, they're the only real award show that counts anymore. Um, I look at the can work now and I'm like, I cannot believe that one. I cannot believe that one. That's been done before. That's an interesting idea, but it's the wrong tone of voice for that brand. That brand doesn't have the right to say this, you know. So I find it's all become a little bit watered down. And I think again it comes back down to fear. I think people are holding companies are scared. I think clients are scared. And when people are scared, they play it safe. And I think that's maybe what's happened overall. That said, I do think with all the indies, all the independent agencies coming out now, I think we're heading back to another golden age of creativity where it's smaller. You can trust people in smaller groups. I'm sure you know about Dunbar's number. It's mentally how any group over 150 uh, of friends and people that it kind of changes the psychological dynamic of how people interact, right? So it comes from a tribe of chimps actually, and a group of 150, they could recognize each other, understand each other's behavior, and they move as a beautiful little organic unit. When it gets bigger than that, something else happens. I'm not sure what that name is, but it kind of becomes impersonal and becomes a little cutthroat, a little bit survivalish. And I think going back to smaller little teams and smaller agencies, I think will create more trust, and with trust comes much better work.
Yeah, I think I've heard that repackaged in a different way, but it was more about it's only normal for human beings to remember 150 names really well, and everything else is just a couple of letters that you go, who is that? You have to do association, things like that. You can only have affinity, emotional connection to about 100,
That's it.
150.
Hmm.
Um, we have kind of moved a little bit away from the US. So coming back, one last question, and I guess it's a personal experience question of Inkfish. How about this? A day in a life of Darren Inkfish. If without you know being too specific, what is a person who's running a lean machine operation where you bring in contractors, freelancers as and when it happens? What is the day-to-day trials and tribulations of working with a client? I know you mentioned already things like I've got to be on a plane at this time just to do this 1 hour meeting and coming back.
Hmm.
Give us a picture because we can't imagine that outside the US.
What I'd love to say is I spend my day coming up with cool ideas and working with interesting people around the world, and that's all I do. But like I mentioned in the beginning, if you don't build that structure and you don't have your systems in place, then you can't make the creative work. And if I'm being critical, I do a lot more grown up stuff that's very boring now than I like. I do a lot of contracts, NDAs, making sure international payments are done, always sort of collecting new creatives to work with. Whenever I travel, I will take a few days out and interview creatives in that area, even if it's within the States, sometimes Miami, sometimes when I go to Australia, I make sure I see everyone so I can stay in touch with everyone. So I kind of having to do the HR on that side of it, as in HR in terms of like recruitment. So that takes a lot more of my time that I'd like. And what I'm trying not to do is just keep going back to the same teams all the time. I have the teams I trust, and that's great, but I don't think that is true to being creative, right? I need to pick a different tool each time and try and see. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. So I end up doing a lot of that stuff. And then the other thing I do is, I mean, I'm grateful that I can still think of ideas. I'm 47 now. I'm sure I'll be becoming boring soon. Keep waiting for it. Um, but what I do is on any brief is I will crack three or four ways in, whether it's a platform or a concept or ideas or activations, and I'll do three or four that I think are great, and I'll say this is the bar. right? And that will sometimes mean me staying up till 3 a.m. just trying to get those few ideas. Because if I don't set the bar, then we start at the bottom and we end up reviewing and reviewing and reviewing and reviewing until we get up to that level. But if I can set that bar in the beginning, everyone's like, oh, wow, he's not looking for 50 ideas, right? Like I said, here in the States, a lot of it is about evidence of industry. Oh, we came up with 50 ideas. I'm like, but they're all bad. Just bring me five killer ones. Bring me five ones that I'm jealous of. Let's just rather do that. But the way they've been trained in the US is to show how much work we've done. You need to
Mm.
almost fill the wall. And I'm like, don't fill the wall. Let's just fix the problem. Tell me what you need, and let's also make something that we're going to be excited to make. Something that you actually genuinely want to make.
It's a thin line sometimes. I mean, if you tell them too much of that, you know what I mean, right? The 50 ideas is too much, but then it almost looks like, oh, he's kind of cool. Like, we'll just give him a couple ideas. So there's that balance, obviously, right? Because I have seen this myself in previous scenarios where, yeah, it's a delicate balance. But you're right. That is especially if what I like to call, I'm working with grown-ups. If you're working
Hmm.
with grown-ups, you shouldn't have to worry about trying to
Yep.
fill your timesheet, really, right? It's about quality over quantity.
Yeah, and the way the model works is if a creative team don't deliver, they don't get invited back. And that sounds pretty harsh. It's kind of like an Uber rating, right? And I do the same thing with clients. I had a client last year that wanted to pull me on for a separate project after we finished the first one, and I said, I'm going to put you in touch with another agency. And he almost doubled his amount for it. And I'm like, I don't need to do that. I have no overhead. I don't need to work with bad clients. I wish you the best of luck. And they're almost shocked. So I've kind of created this self-policing system where cool clients get more projects, cool creatives get to work with me more often. Not that I'm a genius, but what I do is, usually freelancers have to wait like anywhere between 30 and 60 days to get paid. And I'm seeing a lot more in the US where it takes 60 days to get paid from a freelance job. The day you finish the work is the day I pay you. And I'll always pay you above your market rate wherever you are. So
God bless you.
people, yes, I mean, I don't see why not. I have the money in the bank. You've worked hard, and it's cool. You bring me what I need, and we kind of create this. I wouldn't say a buddy buddy environment, but I respect what you're going through because I've been through it too. Which then means the teams will pick me over other agencies that need to work with them, which means they come more excited. They know that I like good ideas. I don't need you to work till 3 a.m. I need you to have a few good ideas, and that's all we need to do. So it's this mutual respect, which I think works, and then I demand the same thing from the clients.
You've mentioned a lot of different things about uh, good practice, maybe outside the US, and the challenges of doing work in the US. You've mentioned the lack of traffic, which to me seems like certainly when you're in such a big 1,000 plus size agency is a fundamental thing to have. But if and it could be this, it could be traffic, but if there was one best practice that you were seeing either in the past or you're seeing in other markets that you wish you could just plant in the US system way of working, what would it be?
Beyond traffic, I think traffic is such a fundamental and easy thing to fix. It's a small change with that. What I would say is spending more time immersing clients in the ideas as opposed to just throw, you have to sort of put yourself in the shoes of a client. Like they're sitting working with brand strategy all day, Excel spreadsheets, and then they're coming to a meeting, you're presenting them some crazy commercial about a singing rabbit that flies to space. Of course, they're going to say, like, oh my God, are you insane? You have no idea how much pressure we're under because they kind of need to move from this rational world into this creative world. Um, and maybe you know this, but the creative directors that were selling the original Skittles work, we all know the Skittles work to be completely out there and crazy. Can you imagine trying to sell that to a client that has never seen that before? But what they did was for an entire month before, they started sending clients these random videos that 14-year-olds were watching. And they were completely lateral, weird videos. They were completely crazy, like singing ducks and people like skateboarding off roofs and rainbows and all this stuff. So every single day they'd send them a couple of clips. So every single day clients are going, oh, this is what my market's into. Then they get into the meeting and they go, here's a singing rabbit and here's a crazy ad. They're like, of course that makes sense. So what I would say is put yourself in the mind of the person that's buying your work a little bit more, not just because you think it's cool or it's your flavor, it'll look great in your portfolio. You can imagine winning a bronze lion for it. Um, but put yourself in the mind of that client and what their real day-to-day pressures are. One of the things I do with any CMO that I'm working with, and I obviously won't do it straight away, is I want to know how are they judged internally? Where do their bonuses come from? What KPIs are they trying to hit
You
personally?
talk about client side, correct?
On client side, yeah.
Yeah,
So
right.
I
Okay.
get I get a lot more involved in the client side of the business to understand it because it serves me. And then I also know that the concepts I'm presenting isn't just a cool thing. It's actually going to help them move their business forward or reposition the brand wherever we need to move it to. So just it's kind of maybe empathy is a way to think about it. Empathy with
And,
the creative teams and especially with client.
and you feel that might, and I guess you're not necessarily just speaking for New York. You're talking about the U.S. market in general,
Yeah,
but you feel that that's a very specifically U.S. Um, opportunity that's not being met.
I think so. As I've mentioned a few times, clients are terrified. I would be terrified too. If you lose your job here, like you lose your healthcare, you lose everything, and it's such a saturated market. It's hard to get back in. And in the smaller markets, I'm used to going into an agency. I say I don't really care what title you give me because within 2 or 3 years, I will have climbed, I will have proved myself, whatever we can do. But I came here with that mentality, and it was really difficult. Even going from creative director to group creative director took like 3 years of 3 a.m. every weekend, pushing, running Nissan North America, running Hilton hotels, winning all the awards, managing all the students. And only then I got one little bump up, and that didn't even come with money. And it's because it's such a saturated market, it's really hard to push up in that. So as soon as you do get a position, clients are going to hold on to that with all their life because their life literally depends on it. So if you can understand their fears and what's driving that and what will relieve a little bit of that tension, then you'll sell more ideas. Because creative agencies have never had the problem of coming up with cool stuff. Every agency says, we're going to come up with better ideas. I'm like, yeah, that's like table stakes. We have to do that. But how do you sell those ideas? That's where 99% of our work ends up in the trash, is because someone's too scared to do it, and we say clients are not brave enough. No, you're not understanding their business enough, or your idea is not right to solve their business problem. If you come in with a concept that's going to help Nissan sell 20,000 more Nissan Almeras, they're going to listen. But if you come up with something as a cool TV ad you want for your portfolio, that breaks down trust, and you're never going to sell anything that way.
Okay. I was gonna finish with some um, more generic questions about where is advertising going next? Where does Darren see himself in 10 years in advertising, as we still call it today?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you a baker? Are you doing a different kind of business? And we may still get you to answer that question, but I wanted to get something in there because you got me thinking about New York a little bit differently. And as you were speaking, I like Stephen Colbert. I mean, I like The Late Show. Stephen
Mm-hmm.
Colbert. He's got this thing. He does this little segment called the Colbert Questionnaire. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's based on 20 questions you can ask someone and you get to understand who they are. But I'm gonna make it a version for you, which is more advertising based. And
Good.
why did I think of it? Oh, because of Skittles. Because you mentioned Skittles. You mentioned how the hell do you sell an idea like that? And that is what it's all about, to get to the point where you can do that and they trust you to do that and it pays off. My question is going to be a little bit earlier than Skittles. So my version of the Colbert questionnaire is: Darren Borrino, how do you sell a purple gorilla for Cadbury's? Do
Mm.
you think? No, sorry, it's not about how do you sell it. No, let me reframe. Do you think it's a good idea or not?
I do think it's a good idea. And I think that not many brands could have done it, right? If their core strategy is around joy, then that's how you show it. You show joy through entertainment value, and you show joy through this story, which maybe not everyone got, is like this gorilla's wanted to play the drums, and finally gets its one chance to do that, and it's a really hard thing to encapsulate. I doubt that there were a 200-page strategy document behind it. I doubt there was a whole lot of rationale behind it. Do I think they could have done it as their bigger brand positioning or something big like that? I don't think so, unless they did a lot of different pieces like that. But, to make something so creative and so pure and so random and throw that into culture to create like joy, I think is a great idea. I think maybe that's how I would like to see brands performing more in the future. And again, it comes back down to fear is let's not try and make something that is 100% perfect and watertight and hope it's going to work. Let's put weird little things out there. Let's prototype it. Let's see how the market reacts because we live in a digital world now. You can put something out there and see if people like it or if they don't like it. Like the film director Neil Blomkamp, before he shot all of his
District,
big famous
yeah,
District 9,
nine.
exactly. He created three or four short little films. One was called Alive in Johannesburg, and he put it out into the market, into the digital, into the internet, and saw who liked what. And Alive in Johannesburg was a very short, like, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 minute version of that. And he goes, oh, people
Okay.
seem to be liking that. He prototyped something small, it proved that it worked, and then he put all the money behind it. But in marketing, we don't think like that. We go, as in the boardroom, we understand what everyone's going to like. And it's impossible to know that because the market is changing. Cultural things, personal things, economic things, whatever else is going, it's almost impossible to really gauge with 100% accuracy that somebody will like what you're doing. But one way to do it is to throw it out to the crowd and see which one they pick up. And then you invest more money and make it like that. So I prefer to see more of that looser, creative playfulness, like kind of like fail harder. That's the way to do it. Let's try something. Let's make mistakes. And by making mistakes, we learn something, pull it back in, adjust it, put it back out again. And that's almost a guaranteed plan to win, as opposed to, a bunch of us that are often a little bit older. We don't really know what Gen Z is up to. I have no interest in being at a Two Chains concert at 4 a.m. I want the Gen Zs to go and do that and come back and tell me how it was. And then be able to be a little more playful and pull in those little nuggets that we don't have and then put that into the market and see how people respond.
My monitor. Hold on a second. Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes think it's about when I think of Cadbury's or Skittles, I think it feels like the agency picked the client rather than the client picked the agency. It's sometimes you have to have that partner with you. I mean, again, we started with trust, and I think we're finishing with trust in some ways. It's I think there was. It feels like there was a time when we got to pick, the agencies got to pick who we can work with, who we can help, and in some ways now it feels like they're doing us a favor, and that's where that power dynamic kind of changes. When you do it that way, it's you can't sell a Skittles anymore, or it becomes harder because then it feels like, hey, do me a favor, can you buy this, rather than you really need to buy this. That that
Absolutely.
that 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 dynamic is kind of where we need to get back into equilibrium. Because
Mm,
yes, I agree, of course. Who the most people who are fan of good creative work, who would not agree that's the way to do it? But we first need to fix that
yep.
off the thing that's off balance right
Yeah.
now.
Which is trust.
Yeah, trust. So do you actually want to say where you see yourself in 10 years as we wrap up?
Yes. Who knows? I mean, if I had
Okay,
to choose,
you've done Europe, you've done South Africa, you've done Australasia, you've done North
mhm,
America, you haven't done South America, you haven't done Asia. Or are you going back? Are you staying? What's going on? What's your plan? 10 years we're talking about.
I'm definitely within 10 years, I'll be back in Australia.
Oh yeah?
It's got this incredible Venn diagram. So in South Africa, you can make incredible work, but very weak currency and a slightly politically unstable environment. So it's a little bit difficult there. Yep, trying to be nice to my South Africans. Um, then here in the US, it's great. Big budgets, but big boardrooms, lots of people. It's really hard to protect your idea all the way through. And the money you make here, you can earn big money, but you're spending big money. I'm spending almost $1,400 a month just for my medical. Rent is astronomical. The cost of living is so high. It's so high. So a lot of the money I make here, I end up giving back into the economy, right? And it's really difficult to make good work here. But then you look at Australia, strong currency, good sense of humor, very good, interesting work, very conceptual work, a good work-life balance, and it's just a lovely place to live. It's very easy being around people. It's also not ruled by fear because, like I mentioned before, three verbal warnings, three written warnings, then training. So I can take some chances. I can try some things that are going to like set fire in the boardroom and go, okay, don't ever do that again. I'm like, noted,
Sure.
I won't do that again. But at least I got a chance to try it. Let me shoot for the moon. I've got a couple of those, a little bit of a safety net there, which I think allows for more disruptive work, more creative work, and to be honest, it's a lot less boring.
Good to know. And incidentally, I didn't mention it earlier. Singapore is actually very much like New York, where within
Yeah,
45 minutes you're out on the street with a box in your hand. It's not so much 45 minutes with a box in your hand, but it's not two, three warnings and a visit to HR in Singapore
right.
either. That's probably the nature of that particular part of the market.
Yeah,
Which it can get you. There is some you get to be tougher as well in environments like that. But you're right; those are like part of your journey. It's on the way to getting to where you need to go.
yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Borino. It's been fantastic talking to you, and we've been able to chat on a couple of occasions. I'm glad we finally got to put this together. Really
wonderful.
appreciate it, mate. I'm gonna do a big cut. See you guys. Thanks. Cool.